really not sure that the gravity of those cuts has been quite understood in all quarters. So I think that what I should do first of all this evening is to explain them year on year. I must say, first of all, that these are like-for-like figures, money for responsibilities we had in 2010 and still have today. We have had increases, for instance, £8.6 million for public health, and the return of full planning powers following the demise of the Development Corporation. But the way that grants work has also been changed, as well as shrunk. So in 2010, much of the money that we were given was destined for specific services. So much to support bus services, for instance, or so much for sweeping the streets, and so on. Now, all of these smaller grants are swept up into one, and then that grant is year-on-year cut. So in 2010-11, Thurrock's grant, under the Labour government, and given to this council's then Conservative administration, actually went up by £1.8 million. Now, I'm the first to admit that that was not enough, but at least it was an increase. Then the government changed, and for the first time ever, local councils such as ours had to deal with in-year cuts. We had to take £4 million out in the middle of the year, even though we'd planned what to do with the money and had already started to spend it. So overall, that was a £2.2 million cut. The following year, 2011-12, our grant was cut by a further £7.7 million, and in 2013 and 13-14, the cuts were 3.3 million and 5.9 million respectively. This year, making up the grand total of 25 million, the cut was 6.9 million pounds. Now, our local Member of Parliament says that's only a 25 million pounds cut. What she fails to say is that that is a fifth of our overall budget, and it is only the start. So every year, around December, the government announces what it will be granting to local authorities, but it also informs us about plans further ahead. So we are expecting and prudently planning for further cuts of 9.1 million next year, 8.2 million in 16-17, and 6.66 million the year after that. Yet, as everybody who runs a budget at home knows, that's not the whole picture. There is inflation to consider and increasing pressures on what money is left. Just as growing children eat up more and more of a family's income, the council has to ensure that it provides the safety net for increasing numbers of children and vulnerable adults with fewer and fewer resources. So we've had our budget cut by £25 million, and if the government's as good as its word, there's another £25 million in grant cuts to come between now and 2018. These are frightening figures, but something we as a council and we as a borough, we as local people, have to face up to and to deal with. There is no simple option. There is no acceptable option either. We need to work together, we need to listen to everyone's ideas, and then we need to decide which is the least unacceptable option. We have our ideas and others have theirs, but somewhere in the middle, a decision that will cut millions of pounds from our budget and thousands from many of our much-loved services has to be made. Therefore, I want as many people as possible to look at the proposals that we're considering, and we have a page on our website that will be launched tomorrow under the heading of Tough Choices. It will be directly available from the Council's homepage. Finally, I would like to make a couple of points about our work with the voluntary sector, highlighting how much we value its work and how we want to continue our partnership. The Council has worked hard to recognise the positive impact and added value that voluntary sector's organisation brings to the borough, and we have tried our best to mitigate the impact of cuts on the sector wherever possible. Indeed, this council has gone further than many in trying to build a vibrant voluntary sector. So, for example, in 2011, we made £100,000 available to the CBS to help invest in infrastructure services, including £50,000 to cushion rent increases to tenants at the Beehive. Over £120,000 has been made available to charitable organisations through rate relief. This is discretionary rate relief and costs the council £60,000 a year. Over £20,000 a year is provided to the sector in subsidised rents. We've transferred the freehold of the Beehive from the council to the CBS. We've moved some services into the voluntary sector, for example, Thurrock Lifestyle Solutions, which has an impact of about £1.5 million a year, and Carriad's about £120,000 a year. The council has avoided making cuts to grants, recognising the value that these bring back to the borough through additional funds and volunteering, and we have delayed cuts wherever possible to allow organisations time to plan. We've worked with the sector to develop a social value framework and to improve our approach to commissioning to help create a level playing field. We're constantly looking at new ways to create opportunities to work with the voluntary sector and are seeking to enter smaller community-based contracts to deliver weight management services in the future. And more proactively, in view of the cuts that are being proposed, I would like to see a special overview and scrutiny committee convened consisting of the chairs and vice chairs of each scrutiny committee to take direct evidence from the senior representatives of the voluntary sector locally. These people have been quite vociferous in their criticisms of this council, and I think it only right that we ask them to explain their reasoning in public. And I think it only right that we ask them to use their undoubted and combined skills to do more than simply say no, but instead to propose what we should be cutting instead, to ensure that we have not overlapping cuts, that cuts aren't taken simply in isolation, and to explain to us what they're doing in their own organisations to make savings. With that, I will move the recommendations and invite Councillor Spate.
We've stated throughout the process, when we've been talking about these cuts and in meetings that I've had with representatives from the voluntary sector over the last few months, that we want to consider the impact of cuts in the round in their totality. And I think this meeting will be a useful forum in which to do that. We do want to have a thriving voluntary sector in Thurrock. There's no doubt in my mind that that's true, and I'm sure that I speak as well for my colleagues in the Cabinet. But we do face, as the leader has pointed out, significant financial challenges. I think we need to harness the energy and determination and enthusiasm there is within the voluntary sector to work together, to work how we can get through this. I've said, again, throughout the last 3 months, I'm happy to meet any members of any representatives of any voluntary organisation to talk to them about the nature of the cuts that are being proposed and work with them to reduce the impact on their organisations. So I thank the leader for that additional recommendation.
There is no doubt that some of these cuts will be life-changing for some individuals and some organisations. These cuts are not palatable to any member of staff of the council members, councillors or the public, but we're in a position that we have to manage what the government are giving us and end up with a balanced budget at the end of the year. That's what we're tasked with, and if we don't do that, then somebody else will come and do that for us and cut wherever they think they will cut. In particular, the voluntary sector cuts are particularly distasteful. And certainly in my portfolio, scrutiny have requested impact assessments for all the voluntary organisation reductions that we are having in funding. So obviously we are taking it very, very seriously. Any cut and any impact on the services that we are providing. But we want your help, as Councillor Kent has said. There is a web page going out. We want as much consultation as possible so that we can work together to have the minimal impact, if there is a minimal impact, on service provision and on people that are receiving these services. So please consult with us and be part of that consultation.
Councillor Fish.